It is always, I'm very much thankful to Foxy. And this webinar is organized by Foxy Food, Drugs and Medico-Surgical Equipment Committee. I thank Dr. Alpesh Gandhi, my VP, Dr. Ramani, and our Secretary General Jaideep Tang. I thank Dr. Mandakini Make and Secretary Parag Biniwale, who has granted IOG 1 credit hour. Now, this is very important webinar for me because I was very much curious about this ecogenetics and what is microbiome. Now, already we had some of the webinars about microbiomes earlier, but this is something a different webinar. I've got 3 different eminent speakers for this webinar, and let us know what is microbiome. We humans are mostly microbes. Now, over 100 trillions of them, they are in our gut, in our large intestines, and various flora. So this concept is emerging, and the microbiomes is a genetic material of all the microbiomes like bacteria, fungi, and these all protozoa, and recently the viruses also. They are live on the inside and outside the body. Now the number of genes of all the microbiomes in one person, it is 200 times the number of genes in the human genome. So these microbiome, to my astonishment, they may weigh as much as 5 pounds. So these bacteria and whatever the commensals are there, what we call it as a commensals, they are very helpful to regulate our immune system, protect protect from the other diseases as well. So they produce some vitamins, as we know, vitamin B12, thiamine, and riboflavin. Vitamin K, which is needed for our blood coagulation. So it is very much related for the development, immunity, and nutrition. Now there are emerging evidences for the autoimmune diseases such as diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, muscular dystrophy, multiple sclerosis, fibromyalgia as well. And these disease-causing microbes accumulate over time and changing gene activity and metabolic processes. So this result in the abnormal immune response against the substances and tissues normally present in the body. Now, autoimmune diseases have to be passed in families. Why it is important is, and it is not by the DNA inheritance, but by inheriting the family's microbiome. There the importance comes. And some of the examples are, there is a difference between the obese and lean twins. There the genes doesn't appear, but what they inherit family's microbiomes, that is very, very important. There is human microbiome project, which is ongoing since many years. And they say that any person's microbiome may influence the susceptibility of the infectious disease. And this contributes to the chronic illnesses like of the gastrointestinal system, like Crohn's disease or irritable bowel syndrome. And these microbes of the mother may affect the health of the children, which will definitely be highlighted by Dr. Muralidhar Pai. Projects. Now, what are the various questions that how is the specific microbiome is established in an individual? First question, does it change over time, and how do human host and microbe community interact? And how does a particular combination, that combination of the microbiomes, affect the nutrition, and how it changes whether the diet a person takes affects the microbiome and microbiota or gut flora. Earlier the flora was there, but now it has changed microbiota. So whatever the antibiotics we are taking, whether it affect the microbes, and conversely how the microbes in our bodies and various drugs and drugs processes. So these are available, various microbes and its effects are research projects are available, and they are ongoing processes. So let us find out from today's 3 eminent speakers, Dr. Ameya Purandare, Dr. Pai, and Dr. Rekha Rajendra Kumar. They will highlight the emerging role of these microbiomes in the woman's health. I invite now our first speaker, Dr. Ameya Purandare. So Dr. Ameya Purandare. I want to have the slide of Dr. Ameya Purandare here. If
Yes,
it
ma'am.
can
Yes,
be
ma'am.
flashed here. Yeah. So Dr. Ameya Purandare is Honorary Secretary of MOPS from 2014 and 2015, Zonal Coordinator 2015 to 19, and State Coordinator 2012-22. He is a very eminent speaker, and he's a past president, past chairperson of Food, Drugs, and Medico-Surgical Equipment Committee. And I was closely associated in the last year. He is also assistant AG Somaiya Medical College and Super Specialty, Reliance Hospital, Bhatia Hospital, Masina Hospital, and so on. And he has done wonderful work as a joint secretary in last year, FOXI 2019 with Dr. Nandita. So over to Dr. Ameya Purandare, and he will be talking to us the role of microbiomes in women's health from menarche to menopause. So welcome, Dr. Ameya Purandare. Can I have Dr. Ameya Purandare's slides, please?
Kiran, I'll run my slides.
Yes, yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Vidya Madam, for those kind words. And it's always a pleasure to be associated with the Food and Drug Committee of
Yes.
FOXI. I would also like to thank Shield Pharma for having this CME and invited me, as well as Vidya Madam and all the other FOXI officials. My topic for today's I'm just sharing the screen. Give me a minute, please. My topic for today is the microbiomes from their roles from menarche to menopause. And like Michael Spector correctly said, we inherit every one of our genes, but we leave the womb without a single one of them, a single microbe. Pass through the mother's canal, we begin to attract entire colonies of bacteria. By the time a child can crawl, he has been blanketed by enormous and cloud of microorganisms which are unseen, 100 trillion or more. They are bacteria mostly, but also viruses and fungi, including a variety of yeast, and they come at us from all directions. People, food, furniture, clothing, cars, buildings, trees, pets, and even the air we breathe. They congregate in our digestive systems and our mouths, fill the space between our teeth, cover our skin, line our throats. We are inhabited by as many as 10,000 bacterial species. Those cells outnumber those we consider our own by 10:1 and weigh all told about 3 pounds, the same as our vital organ, the brain. Together, they are referred as the microbiome, and they play such a crucial role in our lives that scientists have begun to reconsider what it really means to be human. So I'm going to be talking about the role of microbiome from menarche to menopause. The human microbiome is an aggregation of all microbiota that reside on or within human tissues and biofluids, along with the corresponding anatomical sites in which they reside. The Human Microbiome Project took on the project of sequencing the genome of human microbiota that normally inhabit the skin, mouth, nose, digestive tract, and the vagina. It reached a milestone in 2012 with the initial results published for the public. To put the microbiome into perspective by numbers, about 10 to trillion is the number of symbiotic microbial cells harbored by each person, primarily bacteria in the gut, that make up this human microbiome. 90% of all disease can be reached in some way back to the gut and the health of the microbiome. More than 10,000 different microbe species researchers have been able to identify living in the human body, and 10 times as many as outside organisms are there as human cells in the human body. 100:1 is the genes in our microbiome outnumbering the genes in our genome, and that is a startling fact. Almost 22,000 genes are noted in the human gene catalog, and 3.3 million non-redundant genes are seen in the human microbiome. What we must also remember from the clinical aspect is that 99% individual humans are identical to each other as far as the genes are concerned, but only 80 to 90% is the difference. That is not the similarity, but the difference occurs between two individuals as far as the microbiome is concerned. So just like as individuals, we have our own genetic makeup, we have very varied and different microbiome makeup. Keeping this background in mind, I would now like to concentrate on the vaginal microbiome at puberty. Remember, the vaginal microbiome over a lifespan is known to start as early as the onset of menarche. Reproductive age group, the vaginal microbiome differ in women and are variable with short time scale. Lactic acid bacteria, that is the lactobacilli, are responsible for maintenance of the vaginal pH, namely the acidic pH, and we all know are considered as the hallmark of vaginal health. Little is known about the timing and sequence of the changes that occur during puberty in the microbiota, but post-menarcheal terms, they appear to resemble those of adults. That is, girls who are 13 to 18 years, even though they are pre-menarcheal, they resemble the microbiota of adults. And studying transition during puberty, as is shown in this study, is the important first step in understanding community assembly and succession in healthy vaginal microbiota. To put it simply, what we need to understand is that there occurs a similar relationship between vaginal microbiota in pre-menarcheal girls, that is before the onset of menarche, and those in after menarche. The vaginal microbiota are often characterized by a dominance of lactic acid bacteria even prior to menarche. These are abundant in early puberty, and then the vaginal pH begins to decline slowly. And also, strangely enough, you see sometimes even Gardnerella species, and we really don't know what is the role of these Gardnerella species, as shown in this particular paper, which was published in 2015, which are present in premenarcheal girls, but we really don't know what is their clinical significance. So what is the community dynamics of adolescent vaginal microbiome during puberty and the onset of menarche? We all know that bacterial communities are abundant in the human vagina. The vagina is with diverse bacterial communities, and this plays an important protective role in reproductive age women. But what is their role in puberty? We really don't know. And it has been seen in these studies that overall the vaginal microbiome of adolescent girls similar to their moms when they compared the mothers as well as these girls, and in this study, and it showed that even in earlier stages of development prior to menarche, the microbiome was similar. Gardnerella vaginalis was often associated with which is often associated with bacterial vaginosis in adults, was strangely found in again these girls in this study, and are different strains of Gardnerella vaginalis associated with healthy and infected individuals is some question we need to understand and probably think about and research further. Now, Vidya ma'am said it all begins with the gut. And in this important paper, where they did the role of microbiome with respect to oral health and obesity, they found differences in specific bacteria in the oral microbiome related to body size and menarche. And they also went on to say that there is a multifactorial etiology of obesity in children. Saliva is capable of providing clinical informative markers of this and related conditions. And how did they come to this conclusion? When they looked at the results, they said that girls who had good dental health and a typical rich oral microbiome based on the Shannon index, these girls flossed more often and younger girls had more frequent dental checkup. The microbiome richness amongst the girls was similar to their mothers, but the diversity was greater among mothers than the girls. The richness was reduced among mothers with gum bleeding, flossing, increased teeth brushing. Overweight girls had greater diversity and less richness than normal weight girls. And certain bacterial species differed in abundance with respect to whether the girls had reached late menarche and gingivitis in girls. So if the girl had bad oral health and was obese, she had a bad microbiome or an unhealthy microbiome as compared to a girl who had good oral health and good oral hygiene and was fit and not obese. So it was an important study as far as microbiome in girls was concerned. And here you can see if there was gum bleeding, overweight, or gingivitis, the health status was much worse. Also, oral hygiene and what their mother's indices were. And these were the various organisms that were isolated in this study. As you can see, there is a wide diversity, and this is the beta diversity of the salivary microbiome. And as you can see, it shows different health characteristics as compared to whether the girl was menarche or it was her mother, whether she was of normal weight or whether she was obese, and whether she had gingivitis or not. You can see the green and orange circles are varied and away from each other, indicating a difference between the two. And these are the forest plots of the same. So till now, we talked about vaginal microbiome in puberty, and we came to the conclusion that yes, it is similar to adult microbiome, but strangely enough, there are some changes, and oral health and obesity impact vaginal health as well. So let's move on to uterine microbiome. Now, does the endometrium have a microbiome? And does this microbiome have any functional consequences? Almost for 5 decades, the existing dogma has stated that normal endometrium is sacrosanct from microbial habitation in the absence of infection. But recent advances in genomics and bioinformatics has resulted in an explosion in defining microbial communities in various body organs by sequencing unique bacterial ribosomal RNAs. Increasingly, organs thought to be once sterile, like the endometrium and the uterus and the placenta, have joined ranks to being host to commensal bacteria in the absence of infection. And therefore, this study showed that even the upper reproductive female tract is no exception. And when Moreno and his group sample the endometrial fluid and vaginal aspirates using the sequencing technique, they demonstrated that the endometrium harbors microbes. Importantly, they demonstrated endometrial microbiome is largely but not exclusively shared with the vagina and can be divided into lactobacillus dominant and non-lactobacillus dominant communities. It was a unique concept that was published in the American Journal in the December of 2016. This is a very interesting paper. Look at what it says. Are the uterine microbiota residents, tourists, or invaders? So they have been reported under various conditions and populations. It is uncertain the level to which these bacteria are residents that maintain homeostasis, tourists that are readily eliminated, or invaders that contribute to human disease. And in this review, they showed a historic timeline which summarized the current status of this topic with the aim of promoting research priorities as far as uterine microbiota are concerned. And they went on to say it is essential to look at the uterine microbiota to understand whether they were physiological or whether they were providing a local microenvironment which could influence poor reproductive, obstetric, and gynecological health outcomes and sequelae. My subsequent two eminent speakers, Murli and Rekha ma'am, will be talking about the clinical applications of these microbiota during birth and pregnancy as well as during and reproductive health. So in 1900, Henry Tisser said that the uterine cavity was a sterile cavity. The sterility, he said, was maintained by the cervical plug, which he compared with the Colossus of Rhodes in providing an impermeable barrier to bacterial ascent from the vagina. But things have changed, and this assumption was challenged by multiple reports in the late 90s using culture-dependent methods of uterine-dwelling bacteria, even healthy asymptomatic women. The cervical mucus plug concept, which was there, has been shown to be not entirely impermeable to bacterial ascent from the vaginal bacteria. And we know that this cervical mucus plug in the non-pregnant state allows the sperms to go up and helps in the sperm in their ascent up into the endometrial canal. And in the non-pregnant state, particles are shown to translocate from the vagina to the uterus through the cervical canal during the follicular and the luteal phases of the. And the uterine peristaltic pumps, which naturally occur, help in sperm transport from the cervical canal to the uterus, and these peristaltic contractions have been shown to move macrospheres from the canal into the uterus and even other areas of the reproductive tract, and may also play a role in seeding the uterus with bacteria. Indeed, something strange and something that we must remember may be responsible for the uterine microbiota. So as far as to simplify the roots of the uterine microbiota, the first is an ascent from the vagina. Second route is the hematogenous spread. And the third route could be through ART techniques or gynec procedures from the vaginal microbiome, which we introduce into the uterus, such as oocyte retrieval or even curettage or endometrial aspiration, etc. Now, how does this really affect uterine health? It has been shown that if the endometrium contains these microbiota have different roles. They help in gene activation, apoptosis prevention, autophagy prevention on one side. They're also affecting, on the other side, some of them, the epithelial barrier integrity, and therefore that results in the breach of the barrier. And they are also responsible for creating a pro-inflammatory response as well as a metabolic mediated response, which indeed produces mucin degradation and mucin production, finally also for oxidative stress. On one side, there are physiological roles. On other side, there are protective roles. On other side, there are proliferative roles. But there may be clinical sequence to all this, as we would understand later on during the course of this. There are various studies in the review of literature which have shown now, and it's well established, that microbiota does exist. Moving on to vaginal microbiome. The vagina is a dynamic ecosystem that normally contains approximately 10⁹ bacteria colony forming units per gram of vaginal fluid. The discharge is normal and variable, clear to white, odorless, and of high viscosity. Lactobacilli are the dominant species and are considered as the hallmark of health, but a variety of other organisms, including some pathogens, in lower levels. Staphylo, Strepto, Entero, E. coli, Proteus, Klebsiella, Anaerobes, Candida in 20 to 70% are also isolated in asymptomatic people. And as long as there is lactobacilli dominance, the vagina ensures that it is in a healthy state in spite of these pathogens present, because it over-dominates the role of these pathogens, and therefore lactobacilli are the hallmark of vaginal. Let me bring to you a concept called as community type, CST. The vaginal microbiome has been classified even in asymptomatic women into these different communities. Community 1, 2, 3 are ones where there is lactobacilli dominance. L stands for lactobacilli. Remember, 4 is lactobacilli non-dominant, and if there is this community present in the vaginal fluid, it means that vaginal health is compromised, and therefore you will see 4A and 4B, there are pathogenetic organisms or pathogens which are dominant and not lactobacilli. So CST4 is one which is usually associated with vaginal health disease. As long as it is CST1 to 3, the woman is in good vaginal health. And it does vary as far as these CSTs are concerned with respect to ethnicity. As you can see, different ethnicities have different levels of dominance of CST1, 2, 3, etc. And we must keep it in mind, as has been revealed by Rabel in his paper. Vidya Madam did display this particular slide, but I want to bring in an important concept. Look at one side where we have a healthy vagina. And what do you see? Lots of lactic acid, and you see that there is a low community diversity. That means you're seeing one type of microbiota, namely the lactobacilli. And look at the dysbiosis or the unhealthy vagina. You can see different types. You have rods, you have cocci, you have vital particles, you have viral particles, etc. So the moral of the story is that vaginal health is associated with low diversity. If there is one dominant species, namely the lactobacilli, the vagina is in a healthy state. It is fairly stable with community composition changes in menstruation. More the diversity, more the shift in pH, and more the host response modifications. It's an important concept that we need to remember. So what does the vaginal pH really depend on? It depends on numerous aspects: genetics, obesity, hormones, age of the woman, pregnancy, emotions, immunology, sexual activity, dowsing and personal care, perineal hygiene, menses, and smoking. These are some of the influencing factors that have been well. Now let's move on to the other spectrum. I've talked about menarche, I've talked about reproductive or menstruating women. Let's look at menopause and what happens to the microbiome in these elderly women. Are these changes predictable? We all know physiologically with menopause the estrogen declines, and therefore glycogen content in the vaginal epithelium diminishes as a result of the lactobacilli decreasing in prevalence. Therefore, with the fewer lactobacilli, there is less lactic acid and obvious vaginal pH rises. We are moving into an environment which is less acidic or more alkaline on the other hand, and this could mean trouble. And let us see what does it mean, what happens in menopause. So we know that the estrogen secretion is elevated through some phases of perimenopause, and because of some viable follicles and the FSH increases. They say this is called as endogenous ovarian hyperstimulation, with excessive vulvovaginal candidiasis strangely occurring because of this excessive endogenous hyperstimulation in the perimenopausal period. And you know that this is sometimes really difficult to treat as it occurs recurrently, and these women suffer a lot because of these distressing symptoms. Now, when the transition is occurring, the vaginal microbiome also undergoes transition. It changes with decrease of circulating estrogen. To put it simply, as the estrogen lowers, the lactobacilli also lower, and with its consequences, the microbiota gets. The vaginal microbiota therefore have a profound effect on atrophy of the vulvovaginal area, vaginal dryness, and therefore the sexual health and the overall quality of life post-menopause. Functionally, the vagina produces fewer secretions, is less lubricated, and more vulnerable to small tears. Coitus becomes difficult and painful, and this contributes to dyspareunia, as shown by Hoffman paper in 2014. Now let's look at the bacteria in the three phases. In the prepubertal phase, the vagina is thin. There is a thin layer of vaginal mucus, low estrogen levels, low glycogen, low lactobacilli, high microbial diversity, and high vaginal pH. On the other hand, in the premenopausal ladies, there is thick vagina, thick mucus, high estrogen, high glycogen, lots of lactobacilli. You can see low microbial diversity and low vaginal pH. And postmenopausally, you can see that those patients who are symptomatic have high diversity of the microbiome, high vaginal pH, low lactobacilli, low estrogen obviously, and low glycogen, making the epithelium thinner and disrupted. Once the women are started on HRT, again it causes increase in estrogen, more lactogen producing cells, lower microbial diversity, and low vaginal pH. And therefore HRT may be useful, is certainly useful, not may be useful, certainly useful locally, may be useful symptomatic. So the transformations in vaginal microanatomical features of the vaginal epithelium can lead to vaginal symptoms, and this is known to occur from 45 years to 55 years. That's when the transition occurs. It's just the microbia which contribute to this. There are anatomical changes which also are responsible, like pelvic floor dysfunction, loss of collagen, atrophy, stenosis, loss of rugae, inflammation, vaginal epithelium becoming thin and dry, and all this is responsible for vaginal atrophy. Remember friends, vaginal atrophy affects almost 50% of postmenopausal women, but the symptoms are often underreported by our patients due to the embarrassment of discussing personal symptoms or a belief that it is not a normal part of aging. And therefore, we must be sensitive to these patients and ask them this history when they come with these problems of recurrent vaginitis. Vaginal atrophy versus vaginal atrophic vaginitis. Is it the same? Yes, it's the same thing, only the term is now different. Initially, we used to call it atrophy. Initially, we used to call it atrophic vaginitis. Now we call it vaginal atrophy. Now, there is something called as GSM, which stands for genitourinary syndrome of menopause. It's a more accurate term because it's more inclusive and describes multiple external genitalia, the pelvic floor tissues, bladder, urethra, sexual sequelae of loss of sexual function, libido, caused by hypoestrogenism during menopause transition, post-menopause, and these genitourinary changes primarily occur in response to reduced estrogen levels, aging, and etc. And these are causing a lot of problems, and these are some of them like burning, pain, tearing, rash, and bleeding at times. In this study, in which 87 women were classified as premenopausal, perimenopausal, and postmenopausal equally, mid-vaginal bacterial community composition was characterized. And they found that, like I told you, that the CST or the community studies of these bacteria and microbiota, of which 4 were dominated by the lactobacilli group, and those where there was CST4A and B, they were characterized by clinical infection and clinical symptoms. And this is where if these CST4 group of bacteria are present, there is a higher risk of infection. Last word on UTI. Remember, the UTI incidence increases in menopause and is associated with GSM, mainly because of the affection of tissues, pelvic floor, microbes, increased aerobic and anaerobic bacteria. All these changes make it a risky age group for recurrent UTI. We know that the usual defaulters or the etiological agents are E. coli and Gardnerella. And one important concept that I want to bring forward is what is called as covert pathogenesis theory of infection, recurrent UTI. Mind you, this is recurrent UTI. And look at this cartoon on the side. Normally, the E. coli is hiding, okay? It is stuck to the uepithelium. Then that's why even when we treat it, it escapes the antibiotic or antiseptic mechanism. And then comes in Gardnerella vaginalis, disrupts the uroepithelium, and now what happens is that the E. coli comes into prominence or is exposed, and then comes the immune response with the neutrophils, and both these default, that is the Gardnerella and the E. coli, both get eliminated. So this is what is called as the covert pathogenesis. One is a latent infection and the other one is a covert infection. And this is something to keep in mind why UTI is at times really challenging. And in this study, it was shown that the vaginal microbiota are of particular significance in postmenopausal women and have a profound effect on sexual health, overall, on the quality of life. And remember, the vaginal microbiota are diverse and complex even in the menopause period. And therefore, these alterations in the microbiome are associated with specific symptoms, and HRT play a role by ensuring that these microbiota are moved from a pathogenic variety into a more what I would say a commensal variety, and thereby reduce or clinical features or the distressing symptoms and reinstate vaginal diseases. As you, these are the microbiota profile of 32 postmenopausal women, and you will see that there is a fluctuation unlike that of premenopausal women. And most importantly, this study revealed that there was an inverse correlation between lactobacilli and dryness. More the lactobacilli, less the dryness. Less the lactobacilli, more the dryness, and therefore it showed lactobacilli were responsible, lactobacilli deficiency were responsible for changes in vaginal epithelial cell integrity, and lesser the lactobacilli, more the inflammation. We need to keep that in mind. This also looked at different roles or different types of responses of the vaginal epithelium. Last but not the least, one very interesting paper which looked at the vaginal microbiome in HIV patients. And two important points I would make here. The first point is that in reproductive aging may impact the vaginal microbiome and the genital tract mucosal immune environment and contribute to genital health tract in women living with and at risk of HIV infection. In this study of 100 plus HIV positive women across the age group ranging from premenopausal and postmenopausal, and 39 uninfected HIV negative women, it was a comparative study performed in New York. The cervicovaginal lavage was collected for quantification of the antimicrobial activity against E. coli, herpes, and HIV immune mediators. And microbiome studies were performed on vaginal swabs. And this is what it showed, that if there was lesser lactobacilli, there was increased risk of viral shedding, increased risk of secondary infections, increased HSV activity, increased inflammatory mediators, decrease in protective mediators, increased viral replication. So friends, if there is less lactobacilli, vaginal health is greatly altered, the defenses go down. This leads to vaginal disease proliferating as shown in this paper. And what the paper revealed was that lesser the lactobacilli, more the chance of viral shedding and for transmission as well in HIV positive women. So we must keep that in mind. Now, we talked about vaginal microbiome. Vidya madam said that it began with the gut microbiota. Is there a relationship between the two? Yes, there is a relationship between estrogen and gut microbiome access. It's a physiological relation. It's an important relation. And remember, if there is alteration in circulatory estrogens, it may lead to development of conditions like obesity, metabolic syndrome, cancer, hyperplasia, endometriosis, PCOD, fertility, cardiovascular disease, and cognitive levels. There is a bi-directional relationship between the metabolic profile, including estrogen levels, and gut microbiota, estrogen-driven disease. Therefore, what we need to remember is that if the microbiota is abnormal, estrogen will function abnormally. The estrogen functions abnormally, the microbiota will function abnormally, and therefore both are required for a symbiosis. If they don't work together, it's a dysbiosis leading to increased risk of disease. And therefore, what I want to say is that the vaginal ecosystem is naturally blessed with a defense system of with lactobacilli. And if these lactobacilli get disrupted, then it will lead to increase in infection. Some of the treatment considerations for vaginal atrophy are lubricants, hormone support, and probiotics. Probiotics are live microorganisms which in adequate amounts confer health benefit to the host. They contain a bacterial strain that survives the stomach, adheres to the intestinal lining, grows and establishes temporary residence in the intestine, and imparts health benefits. Antibiotics versus probiotics. Antibiotics can cause resistance, have side effects. Probiotics usually are used in adjuvant to antibiotics to restore the commensal microflora. Probiotics have been successfully used in various conditions, but now also proven as an established use in UTIs and in bacterial vaginosis because of their varied mechanisms of action, inhibition of adhesion, immunomodulation, production of antimicrobial substances, modification of toxin or toxin receptors, competition for nutrients, and reduction aerial translocation and anti-inflammatory. They are commonly used in our practice for common vaginal infections like BV, vulvovaginal candidosis, trichomoniasis, recurrent UTIs, and now also in the improvement of reproductive health to improve fertilization, prevention of preterm birth. So to conclude, friends, I would like to make 4 important statements. 1, microbiome has important roles in maintenance of women's health from menarche to menopause. Restoration to physiology results in the return of the healthy state. Inappropriate and overuse of antibiotics in clinical practice will lead to resistance. And probiotics help in restoration of the microflora and prevent recurrence. So like Deepak Chopra said, we are well on our way to a unified theory of biology that will merge body and environment, brain and mind, genome and microbiome. To us, this is the most exciting and potentially rewarding field that is opened up in modern medicine. Over to Dr. Muralidhar Pai and to Dr. Rekha to tell us about what the implications of microbiome are in our field in specific clinical scenarios. Thank you so much for patient hearing.
Vidya ma'am, unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amir. It was very exhaustive talk from menarche to menopause, and it was a very excellent. And I will not take any questions right now because people are waiting eagerly to listen to the next speakers. Now I introduce Dr. Muralidhar Pai, who is our next speaker, and he is teacher par excellence, and he has got 8-time best teacher, 3 times best teaching material award, and he is author of Holland Bruce Manual of Obstetrics. He is a corresponding national editor, national chairman, Foxy Public Awareness Committee in 2004. And over to Dr. Muralidhar Pai because the list is exhaustive. And we know Muralidhar Pai as a very good speaker, very renowned speaker, and let him highlight his topic. And we all know that in humans, the composition of GIT microbiomes are established at birth. And whether it is birth from a cesarean section or vaginal delivery, does this microbiome alter and composition alters? That's what I want to know from Dr. Muralidhar Pai from his, that is cesarean birth and what happened to the neonatal microbial in the.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So my topic is cesarean delivery and newborn gut microbiome.
Hello.
What's the connection between this?
Uh,
It was very interesting
ಆಮೇಲೆ
to me.
ಮಾತಾಡ ಆಮೇಲೆ ಮಾತಾಡ lecture ನಾಗಿದ್ದೀನಿ.
Yeah, it was very interesting for me to understand this connection between cesarean delivery and the newborn gut microbiome. As the previous speakers have told, that human gut contains 10 to the power of 14 bacteria, that is 10 times the total number of human cells. That's probably, the royalty and some of the movie heroes would refer to themselves hum instead of I. They would call themselves we. Probably they mean that themselves plus the microbiome that they contain to the power of 14 microbiomes that they have. So that's why they call themselves hum instead of man. So it's a habitat for diverse and dynamic microbiota ecosystem. Dr. Amay has beautifully given us the different varieties and the diversity of the microbiomes that are present everywhere, not just the gut, but in the vagina, the uterus, and the tubes, and everywhere, and at different times of our life. How do these develop? The development of intercellular microflora is very, very interesting. How do we get it, actually? It starts at birth and it is influenced by the mode of delivery. This is very interesting. Nobody thought quite lately that how do we get this? Is there any influence by the mode of delivery? Yes, the mode of delivery makes a huge difference in us acquiring the different types of microbiota in our intestinal flora. Vaginal or skin microbacteria. Again, May has told you how many types and varieties of vaginal microbiomes are there, and they are also there on our skin. That also is the source of our intestinal microflora. Place of birth, obviously, in a very clean area, you don't get a lot of microbiota. So now we have to question whether the clean area is good or unclean area is good. Of course, unclean area is not good, but what it means, the place of birth also influences acquiring the intestinal microflora. The type of infant feeding. How do you feed the baby? Do you feed with just the pure breast milk, and how cleanly it is kept, and about the bottle feeding and other things. So from everywhere we get this. And then birth weight matters. If you are having a good birth weight, then probably you acquire a certain type of microbiota. If you don't have good birth weight, you attract other type of microbiota. Gestational age at birth. Preterm babies attract few, the term babies attract different ones. Hospitalization after birth. Suppose you are kept for a long time in the hospital, then you will acquire variety of microbiota from the hospital. It's like nosocomial infection. Then prenatal administration of probiotics to the mother. If mother has received any probiotics, then also it will affect the acquisition of those from the child. As Amay has told beautifully, you can get it from anywhere, from ascending, you can get it from the blood, you can get it from anywhere. So the baby somehow gets it if the mother is given probiotic. Then intrapartum antibiotic prophylaxis. If the mother has received antibiotics, obviously it will influence the type of microbiota the baby can get. So right from the birth, right from the, then from the surrounding areas, that is the vagina, from the skin, from the surfaces in the hospital, and it also depends upon birth weight, gestational age, and the mother taking probiotics and antibiotics. Everything will influence, everything will write sort of a story. It's not, I was thinking it's only, first we thought Brahma writes on our forehead with what we call Hanebara. That may be true. But then we thought it's the genetics which will write our future. That is also true. Now it is surprising that microbiomes will write our future. They write what happens to us. What do you think, Ahmed? Isn't it? So everybody is influencing us, right from gods to the genes and to the microbiomes. So what is the role of intestinal microbiome? It plays a critical role. Amay has already told you how it affects the girls in menarche during reproductive age group and in the menopause. He mainly talked about the vaginitis and things like that, but it has a bigger role than that. So maturation of our host immune system depends upon the microbiome that we acquire. And this is extremely important. As all of us know, most of our diseases finally have some connection with the immunology, especially the autoimmune diseases that we acquire later in our life. Protection from pathogens. That's exactly why probiotics are given along with antibiotics. So protection from pathogens also depends upon the microbiome. Providing nutrients. So whatever we eat has to be finally digested and absorbed by our body, and microbiomes play a very great role in that. So early microbiota colonization may influence occurrence of later diseases. It is something like what we call Barker hypothesis in the intrauterine growth restriction, which will have an effect later in life. It's not exactly the same, but similar. So the microbiome will decide what type of diseases we get later in our life. So independently to the mode of delivery, low total diversity of gut microbiota during the first few weeks of our life was associated with allergic diseases. So that's how it will affect what happens to us later in life. So it is this person who actually found the connection, that is Knight Robb. The exposure of newborns to maternal vaginal microbiota is interrupted with cesarean section. So obvious, this is very, very obvious. We all knew this, but we never thought of this. Of course, we knew that the vaginal delivery will make the child get direct mother to child transmission in HIV, but we never thought of the microbiomes. So he's the first person who clearly established there is definite interruption of exposure to the child if we do cesarean section. So he went on to say babies born by cesarean section have less diverse in their microbiome as a result of lack of exposure to mother's vaginal flora. So the babies born by vaginal birth pick up the mother's microbiota, but others have no opportunity to do this. And this begins the seeding of their own microbiome. So that is the first seeding that we all would get. But if you don't have the vaginal birth, you may miss out on those very important microbiomes. You may get it later through different sources, but that is the best way to get it. So this is another reason why the vaginal birth should be encouraged. Just adding to the loud voice that is going in for vaginal births. Delivery mode and microbiota. Delivery mode shapes the acquisition of the initial microbiota, which I've already told you. Upon delivery, the neonate is exposed to the wide array of microbes, a variety of sources, including maternal bacteria. So it's not just during the birth time. Later, the baby is all the time on the mother. It is if it is suckling the mother's breast milk and it is handled by the mother or whoever handling it, it will get from everywhere. So vaginal delivered infants may get lactobacillus, Prevolta, and Snathipia, whereas cesarean section babies will get Staphylococcus, Corynebacterium, and Propionibacterium. So the diversity and colonization pattern was significantly associated with the mode of delivery during the first 3 months of life. So they influence first 3 months very heavily because afterwards the baby will acquire from all other sources. Significant differences disappear after 6 months. So after 6 months, these microbiome which are acquired at the time of birth may not have that much of influence. So what? Cesarean delivery has been associated with increased risk of immune and metabolic disorders. So these are the two disorders definitely influenced by the mode of delivery and the acquisition of the microbiome due to imbalances in the gut bacteria. So what are the other possible diseases? There are so many articles, as you can see here, up to 5 I have quoted. There are many more. And these are all the recent ones. As you can see here, 2015, 2016, and recent ones. So the diseases that you can pick up just by the change in the mode of delivery to cesarean section are asthma, which is something to do with the autoimmunity. And also you can have different types of allergies. I was wondering why most of the children that are born by cesarean section have allergies to all sorts of things, including peanuts, to the milk, and so many things. So it is because of this microbiomes, autoimmunity, and they have got even autism. That is very surprising. A good friend of mine is a psychiatrist, and he was the other day we were discussing. I'm supposed to give a talk there also, wherein the mode of delivery, vaginal or cesarean section, has a big influence on autism. And this is the connection. This is the connection. Obesity. These children will have obesity also, and type 1 diabetes and GI infections. What's the proof of all this? Is it just a speculation, or is there a proof for this? So babies born vaginally and those babies who were born by cesarean section, they were swabbing of the mouth with a gauze previously put in vagina, increased the levels of beneficial bacteria, including lactobacillus and other bacteria. So this is how they proved their theory or the hypothesis. There was more proof. There was a study done, cesarean section babies versus the cesarean section babies which were not treated with the swabbing. The unexposed babies, bacteria were found to be underrepresented. So they didn't have enough bacteria to develop their immune system. Colonization of the baby's gut, the baby, it helps in digestion of the milk and to understand what is self and what is foreign. And this allows for a normally developing immune system. So infants receive beneficial bacteria when they are exposed to vaginal secretions through the vaginal birth and also the fecal bacteria. This coating protects them from the harmful bacteria that causes illness. Breastfeeding is another way of babies getting bacteria which are very useful to them. Babies born by section pick up skin bacteria and from anywhere and other surfaces. As I told you, they get it from the medical staff and the people that are around them. And these are very dangerous ones, that is Clostridium difficile, Pseudomonas, which are not really good ones. So more prone for infections in the first weeks of life, and there is an increased risk of developing allergies, autoimmune diseases, and becoming overweight. So this is the huge difference between vaginal birth and cesarean birth in terms of acquiring the useful microbiome, which will help us develop our immunity. And once you have good immunity, obviously this will come. If you don't have good immunity, the infections will be high. So how to improve cesarean section infants' microbiome? The number one is vaginal fluid swabbing. Swabs that are in the vaginal fluid, if you just seed them through the mouth, it looks little, it's not acceptable. They have done it and proven. All the long consequences of restoring microbiota remain unclear, but it is definitely going to be very useful. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Pai. And really, it is a very wonderful talk, and take-home messages are clear. Whether in your practice you do this swabbing of vagina?
No, we have not yet done it.
Yes. So we are creator of our destiny, as you told. So our microbiomes are our destiny nowadays.
Yeah.
Yes. So there are many questions on this, but I would like to take at the end because already we are running short of time. So I would like to call upon the third speaker on our this one platform. Yeah. Yes. Dr. Rekha Rajendra Kumar, I welcome you here on this platform. She is also a member of Food and... Hello, welcome.
Thank you.
Yes. So she has many gold medals. She is very academically, very... Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, it has become mute. Yes. Yes, I welcome Dr. Rekha Rajendra Kumar. She is a medical director and IVF consultant at Miracle IVF Hospital, Chandana Hospital and Gynae Endoscopy Center. She has worked for many committees of FOXI and she's a member of my committee as well. She has many papers and publications, articles, and she has more than 40 radio and television talks. So she's very wonderful speaker and she works into infertility. Let us listen from her how the microbiomes help in the ART outcome. Welcome, Rekha, and start.
Ma'am, this is Dr. Kiran. I just want to add a couple of lines about Rekha, ma'am. Ma'am recently received the Kittur Rani Chennamma Award in April 2020.
Yes. I could not read. Yes. Kittur Rani Chennamma. Yeah. She is like Kittur Rani Chennamma only.
Definitely.
Let us fight.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes.
I'll start my talk.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
And also, ma'am, before you start the talk, one more point I want to say, because there was recently a marathon on walk on May 10th, and ma'am was the person who completed 15 kilometers. So I thought I should
15. Okay. Yes. I could not read between the lines, but you could.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, FOXI colleagues, my seniors, Dr. Vidya Tobbi, my co-speakers, and more than anything, the audience who are here. You are supposed to have actually a post-lunch snap, but you are all here to listen to us. I'm extremely grateful to you all, and I'm starting my talk. I'm supposed to speak on emerging role of vaginal microbiome and ART outcomes. Coming to the introduction, now, health of the host, any person, depends upon the delicate balance between a lot of microbiomes, which my previous speakers were speaking. There are lots, more than hundreds and 200s. It's just the interaction is a delicate balance between all of them, and they interact so actively with the internal milieu of their own host, and ultimately it can be a beneficial effect or a detrimental effect. Let us just move on. The disturbance in their composition can happen, and also that may lead to different kind of health issues, as they have already mentioned. I'm going to speak on the ART aspect, that is the fertility aspect of these microbiomes. The outgrowth of opportunistic bacterial pathogens, that is the bad ones, can threaten the health and life of the host. I'm audible, right? Hello?
Yes, ma'am. Perfectly audible.
Fine. Okay. There is diversity of the microbial ecology within the human body. The vaginal microbiota is unique in that in many women, it is most often dominated by the lactobacillus, as all of us have been studying over so many years. I'm not touching upon the uterine microbiota here because that itself is a big topic. I'm talking on the vaginal microbiota. So the lactobacillus is the age-old one and a very familiar one. However, in some women, it lacks the lactobacillus species, that is the vaginal environment lacks the lactobacillus species, and that is compromised of a wide array of facultative anaerobes, which we are not happy with, which we have never invited, and they cause an increased risk of infection and ultimately that is reproductive and the obstetric outcomes are disastrous. And we don't want that to happen. The composition and function of the vaginal microbiota appear to play an important role in pregnancy, and definitely the precursor of that is the bad fertility treatment outcomes. So interestingly, the level of protection against infection can also vary by species and strains of the lactobacillus itself. There are many strains inside the lactobacillus. When I talk in my future slides, I'm going to explain that. So the microbiome profiling enables accurate prediction of both the failure and the success of the fertility treatment. So the women with an unfavorable profile had 7 times, that is a very great number, 7 times lower chance of achieving a pregnancy. Just the microbiome itself has such a great impact. So 7 times lower chance of achieving pregnancy compared to the women who had a favorable one. So just coming to the few definitions, because we are going to use these terms frequently in future slides. The collection of the microorganisms that live on or in the human body, not only in the vaginal flora, constitutes the microbiota, and a complete genetic profile is referred to as the microbiome, that one intact term. Probiotics are the foods. I'm just telling the pro. They are the probiotics are the food or the supplements that contain live microorganisms intended to maintain or improve the good bacteria, which are the invited ones, what we want to be there. That's a normal microflora in the other simple words. We want that in the body. The prebiotics, what is the difference with the pre and pro? Prebiotics are the food, typically high fiber food, especially in terms of the GIT, that act as the food for the human microflora. They are the food for the microflora itself. The use of pre and probiotics together is called the microbiome therapy. The urogenital site, as Dr. Maya was speaking, the urogenital site itself comprises of 9% of the total human microbiome compared with the GIT, which makes about 29% of the total. That's around roughly 2 to 3 times. The normal microflora of the reproductive tract includes a variety of lactobacillus species which promote a healthy, supportive environment for the embryo in the pre and periconceptual period. So that ultimately we want that lactobacillus species. The most common bacteria that inhabit the vagina belong to the genus Lactobacillus and comprises 90 to 95%. That's a very high composition of the total bacterial count in the reproductive tract. Lactobacillus acidophilus is the most researched strain, as all of us know, that is a probiotic, and it is also responsible for establishing and maintaining a healthy vaginal balance. There are other small chota ones like Lactobacillus crispatus, inus, blah blah blah. There are so many other lactobacillus. Mainly, a very familiar one is the acidophilus. So what is the mechanism of this lactobacillus? What does it do? Why do we want that? How does it help us? The lactobacillus reduces the pH. All of us know, and previous speakers also have mentioned that. It produces short chain fatty acid. It has protective effect against the pathogen colonization. It fights and sends them out. The different lactobacillus species have different characteristics, such as the ability to produce the lactic acid. That's how it reduces the pH from the degradation of glycogen conversion. The acidity achieved by the Lactobacillus crispatus, this is one favorable and familiar one, is the highest compared to the other ones, Iners, Gensi and Gasseri, etc. This crispatus reduces the pH to a very great extent, so that is a very friendly lactobacillus. Lactic acid production boosts the innate immune system also, and so that it inhibits the growth of bacteria other than the lactobacillus itself. It also acts as a mechanical barrier by binding and sticking to the surface of the vaginal epithelial cells. Maybe like a competitive inhibition, it sticks to the vaginal cells and it prevents the binding of the other bacteria. It doesn't allow, it fights and sends them out. It does not allow those pathogens to stick to the vaginal wall, and so they are not allowed to grow and flourish there. Thus, it makes more challenging for them to grow. Lactobacillus may also attack directly the harmful bacteria. It attacks directly, it kills them and perishes them and whatever it wants to do. 40% of the patients undergoing IVF cycles who have no symptoms whatsoever, absolutely no discharge, no pain, no PID symptoms, have abnormal reproductive tract. 40% have abnormal reproductive tract microbiota. One may be very surprised, actually I was, as proved by the posterior fornix swabs, a study where they repeatedly took the swabs from the high posterior fornix when once the patient was induced into the cycle, like the day 2, day 5, whenever we monitor the follicles, like pick up, even after the embryo transfer, they monitored even the 8th week of the pregnancy. One study conducted on 91 women undergoing IVF with embryo transfer, the reduction of the implantation rate, the LBR, that is live birth rate, and ongoing pregnancy was seen in the group with the positive culture for Streptococcus viridans, Enterobacteriaceae, Staphylococcus, etc. recovered from the embryo transfer tape. These were all recovered. Few studies have shown a 50% reduction, which is a substantial number, in pregnancy rate when the bacteria were recovered from the embryo transfer catheter tip, maybe the above ones, the Strepto, Staphylo, Entero, etc. Vaginal microfloral composition at the time of embryo transfer appeared to be an important factor in the success of IVF embryo transfer procedure, with a vaginal microbiome composed solely of lactobacillus yielding the most successful outcome. So if that woman has lactobacillus inside her, that fights up against everything, and the pregnancy is, we get a more favorable result after the IVF ET procedure in her. The chances of take-home baby rate is much more in these women. In the infertility clinical setting, a broad spectrum antibiotic therapy, as we use amoxicillin, levofloxacin, etc., was used to modulate the non-lactobacillus dominant environment. They wanted to convert these pathogens to a lactobacillus dominant conducive atmosphere by the combination of antibiotics, pre and probiotics. When they saw that 53% of the patients achieved lactobacillus dominant state in the vagina and uterus also, while showing a higher pregnancy rate compared to the non-lactobacillus dominant group. Vaginal and seminal microbiome of the 23 couples were studied. They were idiopathic infertility, considered as idiopathic infertility in the sense all other factors were ruled out, like PRO, POR, that is the poor ovarian reserve or tubal factor or the male factor, etc., was analyzed via the vaginal swab and the seminal fluids collected through the PCR amplification test. What they found was there was a differential composition of the vaginal microbiome, but that had no implication on the seminal microbiome. In the sense, the lactobacillus is more favorable, non-lactobacillus pathogens are harmful. These kind of things never emerged in the seminal microbiome study, and thus it was associated with the success of IUI in couples with the idiopathic infertility. So what I want to say is that we are supposed to concentrate on microbiomes of a female genital tract than male genital tract. Studies that characterize the vaginal microbiome in assisted reproductive technology support the hypothesis that colonizing the transfer catheter tape when we do the embryo transfer with the lactobacillus crispatus, this I mentioned previously, if you can recall, at the time of the embryo transfer may increase the rate of implantation. This is an invited member to us. The rates of implantation and live birth rate while decreasing the rate of infection. The L. crispatus, as a lactobacillus domination, was an important factor that strongly associated with even our embryo transfer, even in IUI success. L. crispatus promotes a favorable environment for pregnancy, ultimately either in vagina or uterine environment. Vaginal microbiome has been shown to change during the normal menstrual cycle also. As all of us know, with varied estrogen level, there are different two waves of estrogen what we get in a menstrual cycle, etc. According to that, the vaginal microbiome also alters in the physiological range. Why I'm saying the physiological range, you will come to know in the same slide a bit later. In the physiological range, thus having cyclical hormone influence. There is an association of the reproductive tract microbiome composition with circulating not only estrogen, also progesterone levels. See here, women with anovulation, so the estrogen level in the physiological range has a strong association or a positive correlation with the vaginal microbiome, but not in women who are PCOS. Women with anovulation were also 3 times more likely to have bacterial vaginosis than women. They are not left behind. Though they are a hyperestrogenic state, it is the proper estrogen progesterone balance or the proper physiological estrogen waves are not there. So in these women, there are 3 times more likely chance of having bacterial vaginosis than women with other factors of infertility, thus supporting the suggestion of hormonal influence on vaginal flora. This is one more added problem for us. Alteration in the vaginal microbiome may have an impact on the cytokine network. This all means inflammation in the endometrium or the vagina may be ignited by the pathological bacteria which are there, and this cytokine network is an important one influencing factor in the fertility for the embryo and its adaptation to the microenvironment, because the inflammation happens not only in the vagina, even in the uterine cavity. The same inflammation may be influencing in endometriosis also, because what happens in endometriosis is there is a significant increase in the vaginal pH beyond 4.5. We want less than 4, but it is increasing more than 5, more than 4.5, and there is a decrease in the normal vaginal microflora naturally when it is more than 4.5. So this may be an added causative factor in endometriosis. Endometriosis itself already has lot of enigmas, loose ends, and a lot of unsolved theories, and this may be, we may be adding this one to the list. So ultimately what I want to say is, from the uterine dysbiosis, that blue dark broad arrow, when it takes all things into consideration, the antibiotics, the probiotics, prebiotics, so many things there, ultimately we want to convert the uterine or the vaginal dysbiosis to ultimately the healthy uterine microenvironment. Negative impact of the ART procedure. What happens? The contamination is possible from the vaginal cervical microorganisms by needle puncture of the vagina when we do the ovum pickup. Controlled ovarian hypostimulation would also impact the vaginal microbiome. This may represent yet another argument for cryopreservation of embryos. Not only we do FET, not only for the ovarian hyperstimulation or a hyperestrogenic state, what we create when we increase the number of follicles or the stimulate follicles during the ovum pickup. In the current cycle, we don't want to transfer the embryo and want to do the frozen embryo transfer. This may be one of the reasons, because the environment in the vagina and uterus come to a more physiological state in the future cycles, the next cycle, not the one when we have done the controlled ovarian hyperstimulation. I hope I made you understand. Microorganisms that enter the endometrium from the cervix during the embryo transfer, when we take that tip of the transfer catheter, that could damage the developing embryo and prevent pregnancy. Bacterial vaginosis. Now, I have spoken little about in general, coming in particular to the bacterial vaginosis, what is its impact on fertility. Rather than a single organism impairing female fertility, variations in the overall vaginal microbiome, such as the bacterial vaginosis, may also have a role in infertility as it initiates the vaginal dysbiosis. Bacterial vaginosis is a common genital disorder. I can call it as king of the genital disorder. The vaginal microflora disturbing microorganism with the prevalence of approximately 19%, almost 1 out of 5 in the infertile population, the most common vaginal syndrome of the reproductive age women. They may be totally asymptomatic. Complete disruption of the vaginal ecosystem can occur, complete disruption, in which anaerobic bacteria assume predominance. They overtake the desirable strains of our friendly lactobacillus. Bacterial vaginosis is often subclinical with the change of the vaginal microbiota from being dominated to a more heterogeneous environment with anaerobic bacteria such as Gardnerella vaginalis, needless to say. Few studies have been conducted in infertile women, and some have suggested a negative impact on fecundity in the presence of BV. A recent study among Nigerian women demonstrated that bacterial vaginosis is 4 times prevalent, that is too much, in women with the tubal factor infertility compared to fertile controls. This is just a slide which tells about something called Nugent score, which compares between the bacterial, the proper physiological lactobacillus in the vagina versus bacterial vaginosis. The first slide is about the lactobacillus and the next one is about the bacterial vaginosis. The pH is 4 in the left side and the right side, that is the BV, pH is more than 5. There are a lot of symptoms, and the clue cell is important for the diagnosis in bacterial vaginosis. Pathophysiology of bacterial vaginosis and vaginal imbalance in female infertility. That increases, ultimately there is a generation of ROS. This affects the membrane integrity and flexibility, and not only the egg gets hampered, even the sperm which have entered the vagina, their membrane integrity is also lost, so the sperm quality also goes down, the acrosomal cap gets affected, and ultimately it disrupts the fertilization and implantation. A recent meta-analysis and systematic review of 12 studies exploring the role of bacterial vaginosis on infertility has shown that bacterial vaginosis is significantly more prevalent in infertile women than in pregnant women of the same population, and this review estimated that 1 in 5, 20% have BV, and at least 1 in 3 has an abnormal vaginal microflora. Bacterial vaginosis is associated with a significantly elevated risk of biochemical pregnancy loss. The finding of a significantly raised rate of bacterial vaginosis in women with the tubal factor, little bit overlap with my previous slides, with the tubal factor infertility supports the association of bacterial vaginosis with PID, tubal damage, etc. All of us know, but I just want to mention a fact here. We don't know the order of the problems, in the sense whether it is secondary to the previous tubal damage that is already happened by the chlamydia trachomatis or Neisseria gonorrhoeae, or whether the bacterial vaginosis associated organisms compromise the host immunity and trachomatis and gonorrhea etc. appear later causing STD, or whether the bacterial vaginosis per se can cause damage to the fallopian tubes, ultimately results in tubal damage. Antibiotics are recommended for the management of bacterial vaginosis, but the use of antibiotics, excess use of antibiotics, or injudicious use of antibiotics, I can say, can be associated with higher recurrence rate, maybe because of resistance. Antibiotics may also suppress the growth of lactobacilli, which antagonize the colonization of pathogens causing bacterial vaginosis, and that may be one more reason for recurrence. It's evident from the literature that oral administration of lactobacilli-based probiotics reduce the number of pathogenic bacteria in women with bacterial vaginosis. Now, treating the bacterial vaginosis increases the pregnancy rate, as the slide shows. It is 24% if untreated and 49% if bacterial vaginosis is treated. Some facts, just to mention, maybe overlap little bit with my previous slides. Microbiota play a key role in implantation and pregnancy success in IVF. Alterations in the vaginal microbiome may alter the reproductive potential of the infertile patients, and perhaps correcting the microbial dysbiosis, this is the term, would lead to improved sexes. So we have to bark on this dysbiosis and make it a symbiosis environment. The presence of a non-lactobacillus dominated microbiota was associated with significant decrease in implantation, ongoing pregnancy and live birth, concurrently increasing the incidence of STD and pelvic inflammatory disease. Pathological modification of its profile is associated with poor reproductive outcomes for IVF patients. Microbiota in the uterine cavity, not only in the vaginal atmosphere, uterine cavity seem to be a continuum from the microbiota in the vagina, maybe ascending up, though there are some differences between the two. This may have impact on the embryo implantation and ongoing pregnancy. Administration of broad spectrum antibiotics like levofloxacin reduce the growth of E. coli in the vaginal coli. So this is something in connection with Dr. Ameya's slides. That is why I'm just talking of the ART, but maybe because of the E. coli are flourishing in the vaginal atmosphere, the urinary tract infection is increased, of course, more in menopausal women. I'm restricting myself to the ART. Administration of probiotics with the lactobacillus and or antibiotics concurrently may be considered useful to treat subclinical and recurrent vaginal and uterine infections. Use of next generation DNA sequencing technologies, some emerging things, newer technologies happening, should expand the knowledge in this area which we really need to know. A healthy vaginal microbiota can prevent urogenital ill health such as urinary tract infection and bacterial vaginosis. Therefore, studies leading to the vaginal microbiomes will facilitate discovery of improved diagnostics and treatments for such conditions, real need of the hour. What is new in this? Harnessing specific bacterial strains in the vagina, maybe like a capsule in the vagina or the patch in the vagina, so as to prime the vaginal microbiota. Multiplication of the conducive flora in the pre and periconceptual periods is a novel thought for research. The vaginal microbiota of IVF patients can be characterized with the PCR test, which may be promising tools for diagnosing abnormal vaginal microbiota and for prediction in IVF treatment. We may use this technology and improve our IVF outcome. The success rates may be increased. New area of microbial transplants like the vaginal microbiota transplant, we also call as VMT, which is opening new frontiers for the reproductive health. What is VMT? It involves the transfer of the cervico-vaginal fluid of another woman who is a healthy person, absolutely no problem, has a good lactobacillus count in her, to a patient who aims to restore. It's like donating her vaginal flora. The most beneficial microenvironment so that the lactobacillus flourishes there also. VMT from healthy donors can be used as therapeutic alternative for patients suffering from symptomatic, intractable and recurrent vaginosis, not only for the ART purpose, even otherwise, beyond ART. Take home messages. There is a window of opportunity for improving IVF reproductive outcomes by identify high-risk women, these kind of women with abnormal vaginal microbiome. All these days, we were hardly considering this. We were thinking of so many other factors in women, trying to chase other etiologies. We are supposed to probably include one of the tests like the high vaginal swab to identify whether it's a lactobacillus or something else and find out and diagnose and pinpoint the microbiome so that we can consider on that and treat her and get rid of the problems. Maybe they will be included in one of the battery of tests of our ART patients. Without a favorable and conducive vaginal microbiome, the implantation and subsequent embryo development seems to be compromised, as I have already mentioned. Offering therapeutic options aiming at modulation of unfavorable vaginal microbiota towards a more favorable profile by use of antibiotics, vagina-specific pre- and probiotics like lactobacillus will definitely enhance our IVF ICSI success and thereby optimize the ART results. Antibiotic treatment is definitely effective, but the selection of the right antibiotic is very critical. New therapies such as pro and prebiotic administration and microbiota transplants are gaining popularity for improving and maintaining the optimal composition of the microbiota. However, further clinical trials of course required. Probiotics have an immunomodulatory effect of the cytokine profile, and they confer immunological protection to the host through the regulation, stimulation, and modulation of immune response. Only specific lactobacillus species are present in the healthy flora. These species are likely to play a pivotal role in maintaining a supportive environment for implantation and future pregnancy outcome. Molecular-based techniques have revolutionized our knowledge, and they are in the pipeline. We are now able to explore the microorganisms that were not detected previously, adding missing pieces of the puzzle called the reproductive tract microbiome. Thank you all for your patient hearing.
Yeah.
I conclude my talk here.
Right.
Thank you all.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you all the speakers. It was very wonderful conversations with you all. You have put all your inputs. May I have any questions, Kiran, if there are any in the chat box? Otherwise, I want to conclude because it was a very exhaustive talks from everyone.
Ma'am, just a couple of, ma'am, with your permission, there is a poll which we want to run. It just take a couple of minutes, ma'am, with your kind permission. So I would request the audience to take the poll while we discuss the Q&A. It can be done simultaneously. It will just take a couple of minutes. So can you launch the poll?
Yeah, what is that poll? What is that poll?
Ma'am, just we wanted to know, like, what is the incidence of bacterial vaginosis in your clinical practice? Do you think it influences ART outcomes? Relationship with regulatory? What kind of webinars they want in the future? What are the topics they want, etc., etc. Ma'am, I'll just read the questions to you. I've already noted them. Ma'am, first question is, do these oral lactobacillus preparations affect the vaginal flora?
When we tick, nothing is showing here. We just should tick and leave it inside. I think it's showing 40 progress. Now it has come.
Yes.
Yeah. Poll is in progress. Yeah.
Yeah. Now it has come.
No, I'm not able to see the poll.
Ma'am, the poll is only for the audience, ma'am. Since you are co-host, you will not be able to take the poll.
But I'm doing.
Actually, how you can do, Rekha?
It's coming. It's displaying. Just tick. Yeah. Just press on that. That's all.
Yeah. Vidya ma'am, can we start the Q&A, ma'am, simultaneously?
Yeah, Vera, just show me the chat box.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, shall I read the question to you?
Yeah, you can, or I can.
Ma'am, I've sent it to you on our second number WhatsApp.
Yeah. I think many questions for Muralidhar Pai. It is.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Kiran, can you read the first question?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, ma'am. The first question is, ma'am, does the intake of acidic or alkaline foods influence the presence or absence of microbiomes?
For me, it does affect. And whenever we give any with antibiotics, any probiotics or prebiotics, one should not take it together. And even they advise that they should not be taken with the hot food or fluids. So there should be a gap of 3 hours. Anybody wants to add, they can add.
That's the food containing, all these banana, asparagus,
Yes.
all these are considered prebiotics.
Mm.
And even coffee, chicory mixed coffee is also
Coffee is also, yeah.
a prebiotic. And
Curds and
most of the fruit oligosaccharides
And
which is
fructose.
they're all
Pos.
pre and prebiotics, and
Yeah, yeah.
breast milk, of course, is the best probiotic
Yeah.
for the baby, newborn baby.
No, they were asking whether taking alkaline or acidic food along with these pre
Yeah.
and probiotics, can it affect the
Yeah,
absorption?
that's what the whole today's webinar was telling, that our whole gut biome is influenced by what we take and what we eat. So obviously, these fruits containing prebiotics will definitely influence our gut biomes. I think
Yeah.
more than that, what is on the surface of the fruit, whatever fruit you take,
Yes.
so
that
don't wash.
Surface. Don't
don't wash.
Yeah.
I would like to make
Because,
one point.
we always believe in the diversity of these microbiomes. What
You
they
will get
see
immunity.
today is in the rural India, the children, they play in muds. So they have more diversity of these microbiomes, and they are least
One of the
affected.
reasons why probably Indians are resistant and we can still eat street food, and unless there are very dangerous kind of organisms like typhoid creating organism or hepatitis creating organisms, we tolerate the street food quite well, because our
Yes.
our gut is used to that. Whereas
Yeah.
people who come from abroad, even
Yeah.
Indians settled in America, when they come here,
Yes, yes.
first time they will definitely react very
Run
badly.
to the toilet 100 times.
Yeah, react badly.
Yes.
Maybe because they are not used to it. They do not know their systems. As I was telling in my talk, I have seen my own relatives' children who are born and raised there. They have very many allergies. They can't eat this and they can't eat that. So when they come home, we get scared whether we can give them peanuts, whether we can give them bread, whether we can give them the milk. So we have to
Yeah.
ask them 100 questions. So I
Yeah.
guess all these are influenced by the diversity of bacteria.
Yeah.
I think it is just an emerging, knowledge which has to
Yeah.
be thoroughly researched.
Yes. There is one comment in the chat box by Dr. Rupinder. She's saying that probiotics are known to reduce anxiety, and already the research has been done on this. And there is a gut and brain link.
Yeah, so Rupinder was from all my student from Manipal.
Yeah, many of your students have joined.
Until proved otherwise.
So I was actually chatting with her when in between, when I switched off my video, I was chatting with her. Dr. Rupinder Kaur is practicing in Dubai. I hope you are listening to me, Rupinder.
She is telling that we are proud students of Manipal.
Yeah.
And Dr. Marlene,
She is muted, unfortunately.
Dr. Rupinder was telling me that she's been giving probiotics to pregnant ladies for a long time, along with other pro-nutrients like magnesium and other things. And she found that the inflammatory process is very less, which actually triggers preterm labor and so many other things. So it's I'm learning from my students also.
Learning is a never-ending process.
I'm willing to learn. So she was extensively chatting with me as the webinar was going on, and
Yeah.
she's been giving probiotics, and she's finding very good results. She's finding very less of preterm labor, very good outcome of the pregnancy in general. Even the
Yeah.
babies, the anomalies, and all of these things are very less when she is
Less.
using omega
Yeah.
fatty acids and fish oil.
Yes.
I
Yes. Yes.
have two comments and one question. Two
Hmm.
comments are, one is thanks to Dr. Vidya Tobbi for bringing Dr. Murlidhar and Rupinder in the
Yeah.
same platform and shield.
Yes.
Credit
Yes.
goes to her. The second thing I want to say is not only the food when the NRIs come here, even when we take them outside, we have to raise the glasses of our car and take care about their respiratory allergies also, because that also they are not exposed to the respiratory microbiomes. The question what I want to ask is to Dr. Pai, the food what we take definitely influences the gut microbiomes. Does it also influence the vaginal microbiome? Like, are we supposed to tell our ART patients or pregnant patients regarding the vaginal infection, don't eat that or something like that?
See, I don't have the exact answer for this, but I can refer to one of the Ameya slides. Ameya told that the microbiomes can be acquired. One is directly from ascending, other one is from the hematogenous,
Yes.
right? Other one is from the adjacent places. So that way,
The
yes,
lymphatics
but
and all.
probably vaginal microbiome will change by directly giving through the vaginal route. I think that would have more impact than what we take from orally.
But we
Generally,
don't.
Sir, just
Ameya wants to comment. Ameya
Ameya
wants
can
to comment.
you
Yeah.
you can enlighten us with that.
sir, there is something called as migration of the microbiome.
Okay.
So
Yes.
whatever comes from the gut, it migrates to the vagina because both the orifices are close by.
Okay.
But this migration, even though it is a natural process, can be hindered depending upon environmental, what
Yeah.
the environmental conditions are.
Yeah.
And therefore, with respect to vagina, this migration at times can be less effective. And therefore, vaginal probiotics
That's
or vaginal direct vaginal implantation of the microbiome will be more better and will be more clinically effective, as proven with various studies.
That's what I was telling towards my sentence, that it is directly giving vaginally is better than
Than oral.
oral ones to go and
Another thing that they have also realized is that as the migration occurs from the gut to the vagina, there is loss in the colony count.
Yeah.
While direct implantation into the
Implantation.
vagina ensures that a higher colony count is present.
Yeah. So there is FMT, like that there is VMT, as Rekha was telling. I wanted some comments from Rekha about this VMT treatment. The new research is going on VMT. And do you advocate in your infertility practice routinely the probiotics?
Yeah, as Dr. Ameya and Dr. Murlidhar Pai told, I give regularly the lactobacillus orally to all my patients soon after they're induced into not only IVF, any infertility patients. The lactobacillus I give, other than vitamin D to both the couples, lactobacillus I give to the woman. That is one thing. But vaginal preparation, I'm unaware of, if at all anything, except the douche or the
No, you
washing.
mentioned in your talk.
It's
no?
coming
Yeah.
up. That is what I told. I have not sucked the vaginal secretion of one woman and put it to another woman, because I don't know about the STDs and HIVs and all
we
that.
don't know.
I'm not sure of. So practically, I have not done. It's just an evolving. So I just want to
Evolving
add
section.
the new facet of that. So I added that slide. My interest would be whether there is any vaginal preparations like the tablet or patch, anything, so that instead of oral, as Dr. Ameya said, the colony count will go down when it comes to the vagina when we have taken orally. If at all there is any vaginal preparation, I can readily start using it to my patients.
Yeah.
Madam, one more point I want to make, that these probiotics, namely the vaginal probiotics, by increasing the lactobacilli, various vaginal infections, both opportunistic and pathogenic, are significantly reduced. even sexually transmitted diseases, because the
Disease.
vagina can fight and have a barrier against them, are much reduced in those who have good quantity of lactobacilli. That means even things like I showed viral shedding with herpes, with HIV is much lesser in
HIV,
those who have
yes.
good lactobacilli count as compared to those who have deficient lactobacilli count. And also changes of abnormal growth, like cervical dysplasias, etc.
Malignancies.
Pre-malignant, not malignant,
HPV
but
infections.
pre-malignant.
HPV.
Because the HPV is kept under control, even these changes are much less pronounced in those with good lactobacilli count, because all in all, it mentions that there is good vaginal health and hygiene.
Yeah,
As
yeah.
was in your cartoon slide.
Yes, I just want to
That
add.
was,
Even I just read about one article which was there, a review article, that implication of this gut microbiota and corona. Corona means COVID-19 infections. Even there are emerging role that if you provide these probiotics and prebiotics, and they will definitely help. Like we are
Itara
doing it in
Ramabana
our India.
iddange.
Ramabana
Sanjeevani
Upaya.
for everything.
Yes. Yes, yes. So I just want to have one last comment from each of you, a concluding comment on microbiota and its role, and then we will conclude this session, because there are I think almost we were there in this platform for 2 hours, and thank you everyone. Every speaker spoke very well. It
Yeah,
Thank you
reached
well,
so
the
much.
heart. It reached the heart and brain both. And many what happened is this webinar clashed with other webinars. So maybe those who are very much interested, and they were very keen to be as a participant, they were there. Almost I think 120 participants I have to take from Kiran.
Brain, you
Yeah.
mean it didn't allow them to speak or allow them to sleep, or
No, no,
it
no,
went
no.
inside their
They
head?
were so much glued to your slides and your speech. Especially this one, this topic was very different, no? That's why. Okay. Yes. Dr. Ameya, just tell me something.
So I want to make only one comment, that microbiome is an essence of human life now. It's an essential
Yeah.
part of human life and human health. We must use this microbiota and this microbiome for establishing human health and fighting human disease. So if we have
Yeah.
good microbiome, it is a sign of wellness and health. And if we alter this microbiome, it will lead to disease, and it will help us becoming more it will result in us becoming more susceptible to infection all over the body, whichever system you take, also the reproductive system. One more point
Yes.
I want to make, which Vidya ma'am, I have been making when I was the Food and Drug Committee chairperson also, that we have been benefited with the advent of so many antibiotics, etc. But we must
Yeah.
use them judiciously, and we should
Yes.
not abuse them, because it will lead to resistance. These are the 2
Yes.
points I want to make. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Excellent. Excellent. Dr. Muralidhar?
what I want to tell you is that my talk should not be the reason to change all cesareans to vaginal delivery.
Yes.
I'm not, I'm not saying that, because one of them thought that, when I made a comment that this is another reason why we should be encouraging vaginal delivery.
Yeah,
Of course,
yeah. The
of
comment
course,
came, yeah.
the cesarean section depends upon the particular indication, and we must not hesitate to do that. But what we must remember is that the babies who undergo cesarean section, just by breastfeeding alone, they can get the adequate microbiota
Adequate
which they would
microbiome.
have got. So that
Yes.
should be kept in mind. Also, commercially available, things can be done. So Dr. Rupinder has actually sent me a recording. I would like to play as a concluding thing. I will just play that. I hope you can.
I'm just going to voice record.
Can you hear this?
Yeah. We can hear.
We tell them is to take any brand and take each brand for about 2 months or 3 months, and then they can switch to something else. what I also tell them is if they don't want to do that, they can first 2 months they can take any brand, and after that the next 2 months they can take those little probiotic drinks like Yakult. I know in India as well we get those small little drinks. I tell them to just take 2 of those every day, and they can take them together one after the other. And after that they can restart any brand. So since we're not doing any test on the biome per se, we I don't tell them, plus I tell them not to look at the price, because it doesn't have to be expensive in order to be good. They can just go with the economical one and take.
So she is saying that she is encouraging her patients to take any of these probiotics for
Yeah.
2 to 3 months. These are readily available. When I was
Yeah,
in
probiotic drinks are available there.
drinks are
Yeah.
available. When I was in Malaysia, Yakult and all these brands were there. So same
Yogurts.
brand she is talking about. Even yogurt, as simple as that,
Yeah.
can be good enough. So thank
Yeah.
you once again for giving me
Thank you.
Dr.
Thank you.
Vidya.
Thank you, Muralidhar.
And
Thank you.
Amay
Thank you
and
very much.
Rekha, it was nice sharing the platform with you.
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Please,
much.
of course, and Mr. Kiran.
Dr.
Yeah,
Muralidhar, if at all we do cesarean, we put a one finger there and the same
Yes.
finger there to the mouth. Don't worry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No,
That
we
will really help.
we have to be careful about vaginal infection.
Infections.
Yeah.
So it's
And
not
neonatal
just
infections.
as simple as
Yeah.
it is been put. When they did the research, they have been very careful about that part.
Yes. Rekha, you
want
want
any-
to say
I
something?
don't want any
Yeah,
missed messages. going
Yes, it is just on the lighter note. I just want to say that, as Dr. Rupinder said, the microbe, the flora, whatever we are talking about, the lactobacillus and all, should come up in a big way. Probiotics should take upper hand compared to antibiotics. Patients should not
Yeah.
look at the cost, because recurrent UTI, health cost also becomes much more. Even the gastrointestinal infections, admissions, urinary tract infections, so many things cost much more than this, and may take them to the ICU also. The second thing what I want to say is fortification of the food, like folic acid or vitamin D or
Yeah.
iodine, whatever, may be a thought. Fortification with these
Simple
probiotics
things in our kitchen also, Rekha.
atta,
Yeah.
certain things can be implemented when thought of in a bigger way. People like you can take it to a higher level.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for the all participation. And just I was going through some literature and I just saw this of George Bernard Shaw. So I thought that the microbiomes are telling to us, you see the things and you say why, but I dream the things that never were, and I say why not. So these are the microbiomes who are telling to us that you please utilize us for various treatment. It may not be a Ramban Upai, but just we should look into it, and that may be a future in our treatment rather than antibiotics. Now in COVID era, definitely that is coming up, modality of treatment. Thank you, Shield, for this support, and I'm looking forward for more interactions. Thank you very much. Thank you all the speakers and
This is
everyone.
Dr. Kiran, ma'am. I would like to give the vote of thanks. So, first of all, before I thank the speakers, I have to thank Vidya ma'am profusely. And as chairperson of the committee, ma'am is doing a lot of webinars, and we would like to associate with ma'am with so many other varied topics in the future as well. As Dr. Rekha and Muralidhar sir said, I think it is our destiny that we were lucky to have you as speakers, and Brahma actually colluded to bring us as speakers. So thank you, Muralidhar sir, so much.
After you conclude, I have some suggestions, Kiran.
Sure, ma'am.
After you complete, don't record this, but you go on assuring whatever the participants, I will send you recording, and then they leave the sessions. That you should not do. One thing,
Sure.
and you send the flyer very early, because there
Sure,
were
ma'am.
so many changes. I
Yes,
could not put
I
the
thought
flyers.
so.
Sure.
And that link we got today, if we had got earlier, maybe we would have circulated and got more participants.
Yeah.
Sure,
You sent at 12 o'clock. So all of us are busy here and there. So we could not do that. So
When
last
we saw
time
it was 2 o'clock.
we had around 400 participants last
Yes.
time. So this time it did not happen because it did not reach the people, one thing. And there were simultaneously webinars. So we have, as a food and drug and medico-surgical equipment, I have got diversified topics. So may not be, some topics are very much interesting. And this is an upcoming topic.
Surely,
So
ma'am.
we will do it. We will do it. Okay,
Ma'am,
thank you very much. Yeah.
My assurance is this webinar is already recorded. I will edit it, show it to you for proofreading, and send it to all the participants
Yeah.
firstly.
Please,
Second
please.
thing is,
Thank you
next
all the
time-
participants as well. They have
Yes,
joined
yes,
from
ma'am.
various places. Thank you very much.
Is
I'm
there-
looking forward. Yeah. So
Is
many
there any
MCs.
vaginal preparation, all three of you, or even participants? I just wanted to know so that I can use it in my patients.
So she has written Dr. Rupinder. Eva New is a vaginal preparation.
Okay. What is it? A capsule?
Capsule. Maybe I
Okay.
don't know whether it is available in India.
Yeah, I know. I agree, but
No, it is Zuventus. She is written from vaginal pessary, Indian brand. She wrote
okay,
that also.
okay, fine.
I am not aware about it because I have not used any vaginal pessaries.
Correct.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Namaste. Namaste is a brand. Okay. Looking forward for further webinars.
Yes.
Surely, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Rekha.
Thank you, Dr. Ameya sir, Murlidhar sir, and Vidya
Yes.
madam. Thank you all.
Namaste.
Bye.
Namaste. Namaste.